recognize the ranking member for opening statement. I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement. I yield back.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Distinguished gentlelady from California, Mary Bono. Gentlelady is recognized.
Chair now recognizes the lady from California is recognized.
I'm pleased to introduce Congresswoman Mary Bono, former U.S. Representative for California's Inland Empire and Desert Region from 1998 to 2013.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Welcome to Sagely Speaking. I'm your host, Mary Bono, and I'm so happy you're here. On this podcast, I hope to bring you insightful conversations with a variety of guests from all walks of life, people with stories, wisdom, and perspectives that inspire and inform. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, and if you feel inspired, leave a 5-star rating. It helps us reach more listeners like you. Now let's dive into today's conversation. Hello and welcome to Sagely Speaking. I'm excited to have this guest on today. It's extremely timely. Just asked him a couple questions off camera, and because I have a lot of concerns and thoughts. So Ted Jenkin is a serial entrepreneur. He's the co-founder of oXYGen Financial, a $2.2 billion wealth management firm, and he is president of Exit Stage Left Advisors. He's a national television expert and one of the opinion editorial writers for Fox News. He regularly appears on Varney & Company, and you probably have seen him on other shows on CNBC, Wall Street Journal Television, I suppose, and News Nation. Who knows? You are just everywhere, Ted.
We try.
Welcome to Sagely Speaking. How are you today?
I'd feel more fantastic if the market was doing better today, but any day the NASDAQ is down 4%, it's always a rough day.
Now, would you say this is just correction territory or something a little more scary?
Well, it's always scary when the president says, I don't know if we're going to be in a recession or not, right? That's what gives Wall Street jitters. And the problem with computer trading algorithms and obviously people's own emotions is that somebody sells, then somebody else sells, and that triggers more and more sells. And Mary, with the computer algorithm, sometimes it says, if this position goes down by 10%, automatically sell it, right? And that begets more selling and more computer selling. And that's some of what you're seeing today.
It's definitely unsettling to me, for sure. And by the way, this isn't the only day we've seen declines like this. Maybe, they're drastic. But when you look at cumulatively, the past few weeks have been very volatile. And for me, scary. So I know my husband says, just don't look. The just don't look style of investing. I don't know about that. How about you? Just don't look?
That may not be bad advice, I have to say. Listen, I think if you're going to be in the stock market, anybody that is a stock market investor needs to realize that it's generally a 5-year investment. So if you needed the money in a week or two, you probably shouldn't be in the stock market. You know who I feel for, Mary, are all the people that own Tesla stock, because Elon was riding high for 60 days after President Trump got elected. Tesla stock was around $500. Today, it's down 50% from its high.
Yeah. Who knows what's going to happen with that? I guess I would never bet against Elon Musk.
Oh, no way.
But in this case, it is pretty surprising. But when you look, Ted, at since the election and what the elections were about and where we are now, I think President Trump has talked a lot about fixing long-term problems. The national debt, of course, comes to mind. And generally, we've kicked that can down the road forever, continue to kick the can down the road over and over and over, whether it's raising the debt ceiling, whether it's passing a CR, whether it's passing a massive omnibus bill. We always kick this can down the road. Do you think that there's any possibility of addressing the national debt?
I think it's going to be difficult. I just wrote an article for Fox about this, that I think inevitably the debt's going to get to 40 trillion unless we do something drastically. Look, here's what people need to know, because it's not that complicated, Mary. On the revenue side of the aisle, there's actually really two main ways we get revenue. It's personal income tax and payroll tax. People talk about corporate tax, but it's only 9% of the federal government's revenue. So even if you raise corporate taxes, you don't make that much of a dent. So the reality is, on the revenue side, to get it to grow, you either have to tax wealthy people more or get more people paying into the system, and or on Social Security, you either have to raise Social Security or sort of make it a perpetuity tax. And that's, nobody likes hearing that. It's not what a lot of people want. But on the deficit side, you're seeing what's happening with DOGE right now on the expense side. the top three expenses now are Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and now it's the net interest on the debt. It's not defense anymore. So we built up so much debt. It's like you having $1 million of credit card debt at home. And you're like, how the heck do I pay this off? So somewhere along the way, all sides of the aisle are going to have to meet, because to really fix it, absolutely, we have to reduce expenses. Way too much Democrat spending. But at the same token, we've got to come up with some additional revenue. Without doing both, we won't be able to fix the deficit, in my view.
Well, you mentioned Doge, so let's talk about that. How about all of this waste, fraud, and abuse that they're uncovering? I know it's a drop in the bucket compared to the budget and to the debt. However, it's important, incredibly important, and I think people are shocked when they hear the various programs or contractors, or who aren't performing the work, or all of these things. I think people are absolutely shocked. Do you believe these stories are real, or are they fairy tales?
Oh, I think they're real. 90% of the media may paint different stories that are out there, but the reality is there are dead people that are still getting Social Security checks. There are people that haven't shown up to their jobs, and they work for the federal government. And like any business, it's been the largest growth of employment in the entire United States the last 5 years, the federal government. And there's no accountability over results. That's why you're seeing something like the potential abolishment of the Department of Education. If you and I ran a publicly traded company and we were almost dead last in the world in what we were doing, we'd be fired. And so the reality is, as brutal as it is to hear whatever stories may come out, there is tons of fraud, waste, and abuse. And it's time that we start trying to figure out, like any good CEO would, how we fix up that problem.
It's astounding to me is that in Congress, I think we allocate, we authorize, we appropriate all of this money. And I always say that as if there's a moat around Capitol Hill, and people understand that the money makes it to the moat, but they have no idea what happens beyond that moat. Members of Congress have no idea what happens. And I know there are oversight hearings and agency heads and folks will come before the Congress and testify about the programs and how effective they are. But again, that moat exists. I don't know that anybody truly knows how to, what the return on investment is, what the results are. And so it's interesting how Congress needs to actually really delve into this spending issue and really get to the end game on where this money actually goes. And they don't.
No. And look, I mean, any good business, you'd have what they call to be a KPI dashboard for, key performance indicators. And I think if Congress and or the Senate saw those indicators of what was happening, I just use the Department of Education as an example because I just wrote an article about it, that if you spend $268 billion and you had kids that were 2 grades behind on reading, and you had science and math scores that were in like the lower quintile in the world, you would say, what the heck is going on with my money? But instead, there'll be political focus on other things and not on results. And I think what's happening is that the policies that are being put into place, there will be some short-term pain. I do believe that for long-term gain. But to fix a company, and this one's a big one, the government, you've got to have some of that pain and hold people accountable.
Well, when you speak about the DOE education, Department of Education, the Republican thinking for quite a long time has been that the American people are better served by making those decisions on the local level, that education should be, a county level, highest level would be the state. And so that's really the beginning of the thinking, not necessarily that it's failing. That it is failing is proof that the system doesn't work, that it's centralized in Washington, D.C. And I think people miss this point. They miss that nobody's saying we don't care about education. They're saying it would be much more effective, our students would be better served if this was done on the local level. And so I think that hopefully they can make that argument and raise that case. And we do care about education, absolutely. We just know it can be done better, which kind of is a government-wide thought right now, is how do we do it better? How do we make it more effective? Again, empty buildings in Washington, D.C., like you mentioned, for people who aren't even showing up for work. It's time for some changes there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Mary, my mother was a 5th grade public school teacher for 35 years. And so that's a household that I grew up in. And number one, teachers used to be able to teach. and they actually held kids accountable in the classroom, and there weren't necessarily helicopter parents sending text all the time about little Johnny or little Sally or whatever it may be, and teachers got to do their job and they held kids accountable. But over time, as the federal government has gotten larger and more bloated and created more of a mandate about what should be happening in schools, results have gotten worse. And so 100% it makes sense what's happening right now, although people don't want to hear it, to send those decisions back to the states, send them back to the counties, let them decide how they spend their dollars. And wouldn't it be funny over time to just see schools compete for resources relative to their results? That's the way that we compete in life. We compete for resources relative to results. And so it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. But my mother would never be a school teacher today. She has told me this. She's 82 years old, Mary, and she would never be a teacher because she wouldn't be able to teach.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Very sad. I was wondering what she felt, and now you've told me. But you know, I'm focusing on education. I wasn't planning on doing that, but I guess I'm on a roll here with you. But you know, it also seems to me, and I would love to know what your mother thinks, and you know what you think, of course. It seems to me students no longer get inspired that easily in schools. They're taught to take the tests. They're taught certain things. But it seems to me we've lost the ability to inspire and encourage kids to go into their field of choice, whatever their passion is, whatever their destiny is, that it's sort of, they get into college. It's like, whoa, now what? And
it's interesting you say that. I think one of the huge mistakes that's happened over time, and my mom and I talk about this all the time, is that when I went to high school, I took shop. Now, albeit, Mary, I was terrible at shop, but I would say to you that
do you have all 10 fingers?
Yeah, I still do. I still do. But
okay, you passed.
Woodworking was not going to be the trade of choice for me. But I think it's a huge mistake that we don't have a 4-track system in high schools: a track for military, a track for entrepreneurialism, a track for vocational and blue collar, and of course, kids that want to go for college preparatory. And over time, if you showed kids these different tracks, there are a lot of kids that would be inspired to be a carpenter or a plumber or a welder. These are fantastic jobs and high-paying jobs today. Our military has never seen better recruiting in the last 15 or 20 years than we saw over the last month. And there are people that should be proud and excited to join the military, and that's a wonderful career. And then there are some kids that just don't know how to color within the lines of the boxes, and there are entrepreneurs. But we need to be able to tell our children that not all paths lead to passing an SAT, ACT score, going to college, and then all of a sudden you're 23 as an educated derelict working at Starbucks, right? It's like that it doesn't have to be the path for everybody. So I think, my mom and I still talk about education all the time, and we'd just love to see kids be excited about what is really a potential out there in terms of jobs.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up right outside Princeton, New Jersey.
Oh.
So, yes, central New Jersey is when a lot of parents moved their families from New York into central Jersey in the 70s, when it was more farmland, but they wanted to have a better life for their kids. And that's where I grew up. And
now you live in California?
No, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia now.
Oh, okay, in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, let's pick on California a little bit, since I brought it up.
Yeah, well, it's a lot to pick on.
A lot to pick on. I mean, it's the Golden State. You think about the number of songs that have been written: California Girls, California Dreaming. And I was moved to Southern California when I was 3 from Cleveland, Ohio. Thank you, Mom and Dad, very much.
I lived there, Mary.
In Cleveland?
I lived in Cleveland for 5 years. Yeah, I lived in Chagrin Falls.
Well, I don't remember it at all. But my parents moved me to Southern California in the early 60s for a better life. My dad was a physician and took a great job at USC, LA County Hospital, running their ear, nose, and throat department. But it was the place to go, the beacon, where everybody wanted to be. And fast forward to today, did you ever think that California would be in the world of hurts that it is?
No, this is just a great example of a state that's loaded in natural resources. It's arguably the prettiest state in the entire country. And when you have years and years of policies that make regulations so difficult to do business that nobody wants to do business there, you have taxation so high that corporations and individuals leave solely over income taxes, right? I think the top tax rate is 13.3%. Then there's a millionaire's tax that takes you close to 15%. You know, when you have these kinds of things that happen, let alone the social policies that get people thinking, you know, what the heck is going on here? All common sense is out the window, and you start to lead your state into tons of federal deficits, state deficits, to the billions of dollars. It's problematic. And so why do you think people move to Nevada or Texas or other places where there's no income taxes? Listen, I've owned probably a half dozen companies myself. And every time I try to do business in California, it's like I need an engineering degree to figure out all the regulations. And it's highly complicated state to do business in.
I believe that the people of California were willing to pay those high income tax rates because I really thought that they were getting what they paid for. They believed the services were there, right, and they were willing to suck it up and pay those tax rates. However, over the past, I don't know, half dozen years, people are realizing, wow, our crime is through the roof. You know, of course, the fires, you know, LA is the most recent, most tragic, horrible experience. But I always say California does have 4 seasons. You in the East know you have 4 seasons. California has earthquake, fire, flood, and drought are the 4 seasons of California. And their emergency services aren't ready for all of that. And I think people right now are very angry. They're angry with the homeless problem. They're angry with the fentanyl problem. So people are beginning to really recognize enough's enough, I think, especially with Governor Newsom.
Well, yeah, look at a simple policy. I did a story on this, I think, last year when Gavinomics moved minimum wage to, you know, $20, and this notion of it's going to help people that, you know, had a much lower minimum wage. And you could argue and say, oh, well, it's going to put more money in their pocket, but inevitably that base labor cost just makes companies raise prices. That's why in LA, you know, last year, if you're on DoorDash, a Big Mac combo was almost $18. And so these crazy prices. And so in the end, McDonald's there will probably replace most of those jobs with AI. You know, it's just what's going to happen. They'll put up their boards and get rid of most of the workers. And it didn't solve anything. You know, San Francisco to me was, you know, again, arguably one of the most beautiful cities in the United States. But the level of homeless, you know, you couldn't go a block or two, and I'd visit San Francisco without seeing you know what on the street. Not just homeless people, just terrible stuff. And these are just the culmination of lots and lots of bad policy decisions. And it's why, like, people look at President Trump now and there's a lot of pain, but if you get past the bluster of Trump and you look at the policies are going to be very good for America. It's just going to take a little bit of time, like any business, but I think the policy is going to be very good for America.
Ted, what do you think are the top 3 policies that you are excited about coming out of President Trump?
Well, number one, it hasn't happened yet, but I think we'll see a major extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that he put into place in 2017. And while a lot of the mainstream media will say, oh, it only helped the billionaires, the truth of it is all middle-class people got lots of money back in their pocket in those tax cuts. So if he can get the corporate tax rate down to 15%, I think that will be very interesting. If he's able to execute on 2 of the 3 things, let's say there's no tax on tips. I don't know if Social Security and overtime will pass, but if 2 of the 3, you know, like Meatloaf said, that's not so bad. You know, that would be really good. So I'm excited about that. Nobody gets excited about tariffs, but I'll tell you why. I wouldn't say it's my favorite word, but I'll tell you why I think it is exciting. First of all, there are many, many countries out there on a reciprocity basis that charge us tons of tariffs. A good example we recently saw is on automobiles. You know, Europe would charge us a 10% tariff. When we're bringing automobiles, we were charging them 2.5%. And Trump basically said, listen, there's got to be fair. Either we charge you 10% or you come down to 2.5%. But why in the world do we have a 10% tariff going into European countries and it's only 2.5% here? Like that, he just get excited that number one, he's going to make the playing field fair. and he's not going to put up with crap from people around that. And two, people forget that one of the main reasons you put tariffs on products is to make them more expensive, which means people will start to buy more American-made products. And I think the idea, what I'm excited about, is that you're already seeing major investments coming into our country, and more jobs will come into our country. And if you can get the corporate tax rate at 15%, I think that the combination of those will create a lot of jobs in here. And ultimately, people forget in Trump Part 1, inflation ended at 2% and unemployment ended at 3.7%. And he put tariffs on the first time. So short memory from people. So I'm excited about that. And then I'm excited about how much he's moving things back to the states. I think in the end, California is a beautiful state, but people in the end will have a choice of where they live. And you're going to see the policies that states set on many levels, both socially and fiscally. And I think that's exciting. We were never intended to have a big government. The whole idea was to have a smaller government and let the states make the decisions. And we're kind of moving back to that. And I'm excited about all of that.
I was surprised, though, with Canada. And of course, the administration said it was the fentanyl crisis and their involvement in the fentanyl crisis. Was that just a red herring? Fentanyl crisis, I mean, less than a very small percentage of fentanyl comes over the northern border.
Yeah. It's just Trump. Trump's got, he's got bluster to him with everything. And he's really a wild card, which again, sometimes it hurts the markets like we're seeing now, because you don't know, one day tariffs are on, one day tariffs are off. I could see the fentanyl from the southern border. Yeah, not from Canada, but I think it's just his broader message is I'm securing America altogether, north and south.
Are you excited about much of the energy sector?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the sooner that we're energy independent, the better off we are. We don't want to be dependent on anybody for energy. You remember, people forget with the whole Keystone Pipeline, he was on his way to make us energy independent, right? And so people are like, I want my gas prices to be cheaper. Well, there's a way to make that happen. Remember in California, what was it, at like $8, $9 a gallon at one point? It was insane. The reality is, he has this notion of saying, drill, baby, drill. It's just, I think making us energy independent. I mean, I'm not saying that we shouldn't continue to look at solar and wind and things like that, but name me anywhere where an entire city is running off of wind or off of solar, or, it's very expensive. It takes a long time. And so in the meantime, we need to be able to have our own energy and drill.
It always seemed to me that there's a fulcrum in the equation on moving to renewable fuels. At what point can we do it affordably for the American people? And if we force it too soon, which is what has happened in the past, we're forcing those high expenses and shooting ourselves in the foot. So it's a matter of time and thoughtful leadership. And I think we need to see that. We'll continue with our interview in a moment, but first I'd like to thank my sponsors. Lucy Pet Foods is the leader in gut health. Their formulas for life feature prebiotic, balanced fiber that nourishes your dog and cat's total health. Every purchase helps support the Lucy Pet Foundation, a 501c3 charity helping animals. Save 15% off your first order and use the promo code SAGELYSPEAKING, all one word, and you will get free shipping at lucypetfoods.com. If you're committed to tackling the opioid and addiction crises, then you need to be at the 2025 RX Summit. Use code SAGELY, that's SAGELY, for an extra $100 off. Join top experts and professionals as we share strategies for prevention, deflection, treatment, and recovery. Don't miss this chance to be part of the change. Head over to rx-summit.com to register now. That's rx-summit.com for an additional $100 off.
Hi, honey. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up that I'll be going out with the guys after work tonight to catch the game. It's been a long day and I'm pretty wiped out, so Harry's going to give me a pill to help me stay awake. I won't know it, but the pill will be laced with fentanyl, which means you won't see me again because I'll be dead almost instantly. I love you.
And now, back to our interview. What else is, I guess, out of President Trump right now, most exciting that you're kind of going, wow, I didn't see that coming?
Well, I think that certainly the situation that's happening in Ukraine right now, I didn't see that to be as volatile as it currently seems to be. I mean, maybe there's some other strategy in here. I think what's probably true is that, Europe did need to invest more in what's going on in Ukraine, because maybe we were 50-50, maybe, pretty close in terms of what we were investing in Ukraine. But I just didn't see those kinds of situations being as volatile as they played out, on television. I think what people forget, again, this goes back to results, Mary. There are a lot of people that don't like Donald Trump, and I do get that. Sometimes his personality can come off to be pretty toxic. But when you look at the policy, there was no war for the 4 years that he was in the White House. And already you've seen things simmer down in the Middle East. Maybe there's a strategy here for Europe as for Ukraine and Russia as well. And I truly believe that, he wants to get to have peace. I do. I really do. So, and it's good. That's good for all of us. But I was just surprised about how that played out. I did not expect that.
You do have to wonder the Trump chessboard here. As you said, Europe needs to pull their weight far more than they have. So it is that Trump chessboard. In one of my earlier podcasts, I had Admiral Eric Olson on, who was head of Special Operations Command, and he was a Navy SEAL. And he and I were playing golf one day, and I asked him, when they recruit SEALs, what do they look for? He said, the wrestlers, and they can play chess. I'm sure there's a lot more than those two things, but those stuck in my mind. And the playing chess thing, and it's a multi-dimensional chessboard here, and you have to wonder and just kind of scratch your head, how many moves, down the game are they already when they're doing these things? Or did he move his pawn forward one and oops, now he needs to move back? Because I've seen with the tariffs, it does seem that there's been let's do this, and then that didn't go over so well, let's retract it. You think that there's gonna be a lot more of that? The oops.
Yeah, well, I think in the short term, for sure, I think number one, he's not going to have another term, right? So there's 4 years to get stuff done in here. So I think his strategy has been to completely rip the Band-Aid off. To a degree, when you think about doing a tech start off, it's like, build it, break it, fix it, rebuild it. And I think, it's very difficult to do that when you're in the public eye and you have public markets, right? It's very difficult, but I do think that's what he's doing. And to a credit for Elon, Elon's taken a lot of heat, being involved with this. This guy didn't have to. And people say he's going to steal Social Security checks. I mean, I think that's the least of his worries. He's probably going to be okay on the financial side, but I think it's very tough to do what he's doing in the public eye. Also, given that 80 to 90% of the media is still against him as well. At the same token, I don't feel like the Democrats have much of a strategy either. I think that they're a party that's in disarray right now, and they don't know what they want to be. And you're seeing people like Fetterman and even Pete Buttigieg try to come to the center. You saw Ro Khanna is try to come to the center a little bit, and even Adam Schiff, started to say, well, it's interesting seeing people changing tunes because they're realizing the extremism is not going to work. It's not what Americans want. And so, it'd be interesting to see how that unfolds. I don't know if Trump always has to be quite as blusterous as he is, like when he delivered the speech to Congress, the other night. He can't do anything without putting a zinger in there or a one-liner. He just can't do it. And the bad part is it gets in the way of the policy. And what are the real policies he's talking about? He's talking about low taxes, creating more jobs in America, thinking about how we become energy independent, how we get to common sense reform, pushing things back to the states. These are all really pragmatic ideas, but they can get lost in, tonight's news of one zingers.
Well, Ted, let's say you somehow wake up tomorrow and you're anointed as a Democrat campaign consultant.
Yeah.
What would you advise the Democrats to do? And then my second question with that is, you mentioned extremism, but extremism extremism, is here to stay. In
Yeah.
that those are the people who pay attention, right? And the people who pay attention to their talk shows and to their TV shows, and they don't want to hear the other side. And I don't know how we're going to break that, but we have to. So, one, you're suddenly a Democrat strategist. What would you advise your top 5 candidates? Then suddenly you're a centrist, middle of the road strategist. What would you advise those folks to do?
Isn't it funny, maybe not today, that, unless you're on the extremes, you can't get media attention. It's like if you're boring, nobody wants to hear what you have to say. But I think, first of all, if you look at the other night, and I was a Democratic strategist and saying, listen, you can certainly denounce some of the policies if you don't like them that President Trump is putting into place. But when you have normal human things like the kid with cancer that stood up, and you can't stand up to clap for that kid, you are doing yourself no service. So I would be telling them right now, don't pick every battle. Pick the battles that make sense. Number one. Two, where this fits for both Republicans and Democrats is there's actually a lot of people in America today. And I talk to people all the time that are fiscally conservative and socially, I wouldn't say they're extreme liberal, but they're fairly liberal, right? And so, talking about this notion of like the billionaires thing, like Elizabeth Warren does, I'm just stop talking about that. There's so few people that are billionaires, and there are a lot of people that make $1 million a year that aren't billionaires, and they're getting taxed like hell, and they're not billionaires. And so this whole Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren rhetoric that's out there now, you got to dump that. The squad type stuff on that side, you got to dump that. You just got to come back to what I would call to be like more Bill Clinton Democrat kind of stuff. He was a very popular president and did very well. So I think, pick your battles wisely, stop the extremism, stop attacking people through capitalism who've been very successful, because, by the way, they're the ones that created most of the jobs here in America. I own a lot of businesses, and people forget when you're a business owner, what the Democrats don't talk about is that I got to deal with legal issues and HR issues and financial issues. And I not only pay my taxes, I pay everybody else's taxes as well. And so if I'm the gal or the guy that's taking all the risk to do this, don't beat me up for being successful once I get there. That's why so many people get angry about that stuff. So I think I would position it out, that way probably to start.
Do you think there will ever be a center party? Centrists come together and kick out the fringes and try to govern from there? Actually, as a new party, so the third party.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing a third party that has exactly what I just said, which is, people that would command themselves to be fiscally conservative, but, socially open, if you will. I don't know how many states off the top of my head are legalized with marijuana right now, but it's more than half. And when you add medicinal marijuana, it's probably 80%. So whether you're anti-marijuana or pro-marijuana, whatever it may be, it's an inevitability that marijuana will be in every state. It's an inevitability that sports betting is going to be in every state. So these are just, I don't want to say they're common sense issues, but they've sort of just been invaded into what we are in society. So why fight those issues, right? They're silly issues to fight. I think inevitably we will get somebody who fits that mold, even if we don't have a third party that speaks that middle language and does it in a presidential way. And it's not about, the zingers that'll be on, Fox or CNN at night that get you elected. We just happen to be in that period, I think, now, but I think we're going to need to go back to a leader to eventually bring everybody together, or otherwise it's going to be this 50-50 battle that we're going to see forever. And it's not helpful.
Will you ever run for office?
Well, if I could get my wife aboard.
I hear yes. Yeah.
You know better than anybody. You've been through this. I think that, I've always been a Republican, but, I'm not all for the extremes, period. I mean, I feel like a lot of people just want to be talked to in a normal language, very common sense. And, I haven't ruled it out. I'll tell you that, because I feel like still there are just a lot of people that are very, very angry all the time. And it's not good. And there's a lot of great things going on in our country, and we should be celebrating that. And, I was telling my mom the other day, Mary, that I remember when I was 11 years old, I'm going to be 56, and watching the United States hockey team beat Russia in Lake Placid. And even as a boy, growing up to be a young man, how proud I felt to be an American. And I wish for all people in this country to feel prideful of the great nation that we're in, because we get to get up every day and become or do whatever it is that we want, really. And it's such a empowering feeling for me that I don't have bad days, because I get up and it's like I could do anything I want today. And it's not true in almost every other country. And I always think about that, because people should be so prideful and happy to be where we are today. And it seems like so many people are so angry, and they really shouldn't be.
Why do you think that is? Is it the media? Is it foreign?
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, no
interference?
doubt that we have an echo chamber going on. When I was growing up, there was no Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, etc. So, you've got an echo chamber of that going on all the time. When people watch media, and I write for Fox News, but if you watch Fox all the time, you're going to think the world is, one way. If you watch MSNBC all the time, you're going to think the world is another way. And to really try to get a sense of it all, you should probably watch a little bit of BBC, MSNBC, Fox, and just try to get a sense about viewpoints. And what happens is that if you get stuck in one viewpoint, it's the worst thing that happens to any leader in any business, is the evidence confirming trap, that you just can find things on the internet or on social media that will just confirm your position. And to really become better in life, I think you need to be thinking about all positions. And that just makes you a better thinker, because, your position's not always going to be right.
The walled garden approach, right? That I'm only served up that which I already agree with, and they're going to reinforce it, because my dopamine receptors are going to be excited and happy. And there we go. We're off to the races.
Right.
Well, I hope you do run one day. I do. I hope your wife, you can talk her into it, because we do need more people like you to serve and to step up and to serve. And it isn't easy. And as you mentioned, the boring people, the people in Congress who actually get stuff done or pass important bills, they're not running to the cameras. And the people who are just, the powerhouses behind the cameras, and there are a lot of those people. There are a lot, the people who actually get stuff done. And I look at somebody like, well, I won't name names, but a lot of these people who really are effective, but they don't need the glory, and
Right.
And they just get it done. And with President Trump and in his last term here, the proof will be in the pudding. Will these things be successful, or won't they? At the end of the day, and we're all gonna, I don't say live or die by that, but we will be judged by that, whoever you voted for, the success or failure. And a lot of these things are very unusual, as you mentioned, this switch with Ukraine. I don't know if Trump's approval rating, if you would call it that, on the international stage, is as bad as they like to portray it. And how important is that? How the world views him?
Well, I think it's very important. I've talked to people that are here from various countries, and you still get mixed reactions, right? There are some people that have come from real dictator countries. I know people that have come here from Cuba or other places, and they say, if you think this is dictatorship, I mean, you should see what it's like living here, right? So a lot of people here have an experience living under a regime, a communist regime, certainly not even necessarily living in North Korea, but just even living in China, and the things that you can and can't do. So when they call him a dictator, but I think it's important, because my big concern for Trump and all this, Mary, is if we became an isolationist country. And that would be really problematic, I think, for us long term. Maybe you'd win in the short term, but in the long term, it's no good to have no allies or allies that you can't count on. And, people call it the axis of evil, but I'll tell you financially what could be problematic, in my view, is if Russia and North Korea and Iran and China, and I'm going to throw in one that's an X factor, which is India, all decided to create their own currency. That could be really problematic for the dollar. People forget China is the world's largest population by a lot, India number 2 by a lot, and many and several other Middle Eastern countries far dwarf the population of the United States. So it'd be really problematic. They talked about the BRIC at one time being Brazil, Russia, India, and China. But I think about it more like really India, China, Russia, a couple other real communist dictator countries having their own currency. And then, we're in 40, like I said, we could be in 40 trillion in debt. What's the value of our dollar, right? It's still in the full faith and obligation of the United States of America. We certainly don't back it by gold. We haven't since 1973. What's it worth? Well, it's only worth what somebody says it's worth to a degree. And that would be, so I worry most that we become an isolationist country. That's the way he's acting. That's one of the real risks.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I was about to talk about this. And there are factions within the Congress who've been isolationist bent for a while. Rand Paul comes to mind, but it's easy to talk protectionist, to talk isolationist. It goes over well back home with your constituents. Oftentimes when you say, why are we investing, or why are we doing this? Why are we the tip of the spear any longer? Why aren't we taking care of our own? It's an easy talking point. It really is. But I think a lot of people have memories and know that if we do that, we're just inviting problems onto our own shores sooner rather than later. And so I agree with you. And I'm hoping that they'll temper this to some degree. I think what he is doing as far as making other countries pay their own weight is great and long overdue. Don't get me wrong. However, we also need to play nice with folks and continue those relationships. And I think that's critically important. And hopefully we can get Congress to have more of these conversations rather than being reactionary to a lot of things.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. I think it will be challenging. It's they don't really call him so much of they don't really talk a lot about his foreign policy, because I don't think people really understand his foreign policy right now to a degree. But it's interesting. We'll see what happens in the negotiations with Hamas and whether or not that can be resolved. What a challenging situation that is altogether. I don't believe that Putin will ever really stop fighting till he's just not there anymore. I mean, this is just who Putin is. I mean, he backs off for a while, then he starts it up again. He backs off for a while, he starts it up again. But when you're a dictator in a communist country, what do countries really fight for over time? Two things: money and power, right? And that's that's what all these countries want. So do I think Vladimir Putin wants more money and more power? Sure, I do. And would he try to do it with brute force? Absolutely. Been proven that he's done that many times over. So we need to make sure that, we still need to make sure we're defending democracy, right? That's what we're all about.
Absolutely. And peace through strength. And to some degree, Trump's wild card ness, if you would, his wild cardness. I just invented that term. It keeps them guessing, I think, keeps them on their toes for sure. I do like that, as you said, he's breaking these things and fixing them. I think the spending is just astounding to learn what we're learning from all of that waste, fraud, and abuse. And I really hope we can fix that sooner rather than later. Is there anything, Ted, that I didn't bring up that is on your mind?
No, I just grateful to have a chat with you today on the podcast. I think that it's going to be a really interesting year to see how all this plays out. I'd always remind people with their investing that assets that you have, like real estate and the stock market, are long-term investments. So most of the people in California, as you know, have done very well with their real estate. Prices are insane. And, I just remind people that during COVID, people forget this wasn't that long ago, stock market dropped 35% in 1 month. And 3 months later, we were back to where we were before. So when do you buy things in general at the grocery store? When they're on sale. And so if you think that it's a good product to buy or a good stock to buy, and you liked it when it was $500 a share, if it's $250, that means you must like it more. So, that I just get people to be thinking about it that way, and not to get too panicked. These things swing like this. The market's been on a bull run now since the Great Recession. We haven't had 2 negative consecutive years since the tech bubble in the early 2000s. And just take a deep breath. It's only a couple of weeks.
Only a couple of weeks. We're going to hold you to that. But I do think it's just the policies. How do they correlate specifically? And I think that's what's scaring people.
Yeah, it's unknown right now.
It's an unknown. And in any event, I really appreciate your coming on. It's so great to talk to you and see your optimism and be the first people to, maybe not the first, but people to encourage you to run for office one day.
Well,
we'll write the first check.
You never know. I have been asked about it before, and I feel like, as you know, part of doing it is to go serve and be a leader and try to bring common sense, in what we do policy-wise in our country. And it's we're still the greatest country in the world, and I think we will be the greatest country in the world. But we've got to have good leaders helping people, be humane and civilized about it as well.
Amen to that. Well, thank you again, Ted, for joining us on Sagely Speaking. And how can people find you and follow you?
The easiest thing to do is just you can follow me on LinkedIn. It's just Ted Jenkin, or on Instagram at The Real Ted Jenkin. And if you are a Fox News reader, just type in Fox News Ted Jenkin, and I put out a column every probably two or three a month, sometimes 4, depending upon what's going on. And please feel free to read and shoot some comments at me. Will do. All right. So to my listeners, thank you very much for listening. And my watchers, thank you very much for watching Sagely Speaking. Another fabulous guest and a great interview conversation with Ted. I think that this would be a great guest to have on regularly or once in a blue moon if he would do it up until his campaign. But to my sponsors, thank you very much, for without you, we couldn't do what we do. And until next time, be kind and be curious.